for episode 62, live from my drum room. Get Back with my guests, Dave Mattacks, Brendan Lazar, Gary Astridge, the one and only, and Todd Little. Thank you guys so much for being here today.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, John.
Yeah, and as I said earlier, and I just said on the air, I so appreciate you guys doing this, kind of last minute. Since watching the film and I've been kind of like, I've been buzzing around. I think like all of us have been. It was just so great. I knew it was going to be, I expected it to be really good. It was even better. It just, to me, it got better and better, especially obviously the finale with the performance on the rooftop. And I assume, Dave, you've seen it. I assume you've seen Get Back. You haven't?
Oh, I haven't seen it yet. I saw the rooftop film when it first came out, whenever that was. I remember seeing that, but I've not seen the Peter Jackson thing yet. I'm saving up for my Disney Plus subscription.
Well, we're all in for a few bucks.
Okay.
Yeah, you all.
Yeah.
Well, I won't spoil the ending, but
okay.
I was hoping that they'd work things out and the band would stay together, but apparently it.
No!
It didn't.
Don't burst my bubble, John.
There's the spoiler.
Spoiler alert, they didn't
So
make
guys,
it.
I want to kind of jump in here. I made just a few notes to sort of talk about. I'd love to kind of get into the cymbals, which we've all been talking about so much in the past week or so, and both Brendan and Todd and Gary, you're going to obviously have a lot to contribute to this as well. But you guys were nice enough to furnish some photos earlier today that I can put up, and maybe you could talk about them a little bit. Let me tee this up for a second and say that what kind of blew my mind as a not just as a former Zildjian employee, but really as a drummer, was this assumption that I had, and I think many people had, that by the sort of mid 60s, that Ringo we knew that he had played Zin early on and a bunch of other things and Paiste 602s. And at least I thought that by the mid 60s, around Revolver or Sgt. Pepper, that he had got a hold of some A Zildjians, whether it was in New York or Drum City in London, and that by that time he was playing all A's. So it was an eye opener for me to see this film and see, for me, I guess it wasn't until part 2 where you saw that red ink. Is that right, Brendan and Todd? That was it part 2? And Gary, you saw the red ink medium ride logo on his left, being the 602. And then throughout the movie, I could tell that the cymbal 2 is right with the rivets. It was an oddball. I said to my wife, I think that's a Zin with the rivets. And again, I always thought he played an 18-inch Zin. I didn't know that he played a 20, but you guys know all this stuff. So feel free to elaborate on that first, if you would.
I wouldn't be at all surprised that the 602 came via Ivor Arbiter. Either Mal kind of went in there one day and said, Ringo wants some new cymbals.
Yeah.
I mean,
Sure.
Gary's going to know whether, I get the impression that, and this is where Gary, I think, well, all of you are going to be able to contribute. I got the impression that he certainly knew what he wanted, but I think it was a question of like, go and get some cymbals and let's see what I like. And Ivor Arbiter in that mid 60s period in London was pushing Paistes onto all the key players and probably said, try these. And I guess it feels to me like Mal maybe took them, put them up for Ringo, went, yeah, that sounds good. I mean, now I'll hand it over to people who know more than me, but that's what I imagine happened. I don't know.
I'd say you're right, because one of the things that I was told, I befriended Dick Shorey, who was an executive with Ludwig, and really nice guy. And he told me that after the Beatles appeared on the Sullivan Show, Bill Ludwig told Dick, he said, "You're going to be the liaison with his group. So it landed up, Dick worked with Brian Epstein and Ivor or Jerry Evans. And but he alluded to saying that every time they sent a kit, that cymbals were included, you know, but he didn't go into specifics saying where they came from. So it's very well that Drum City supplied them. Because there was another person whose name I can't remember, when Ringo received his first Ludwig kit, when it was delivered up to Birmingham, Jerry Evans, the manager, and another person whose first name was those two. Mark, does it sound right? It was
Not
two,
Mal Evans, not
All
Mal, no.
well, it was two guys from Drum City that actually made
From
the
Drum City.
on Sunday, and I was told that Paiste cymbals were delivered with the kit. So
Wow.
Okay, yeah. So I didn't know that. I thought that the Ludwig Paiste connection was only in the States. I didn't realize it was at that time. It was when Ludwig kits
Yeah.
were delivered. It was everywhere.
Technically, yeah, that was the deal. Ludwig had distribution in North America for Paiste, but I guess they figured if we're going to send the kits over there, we might as well, you know, stick some cymbals in there as well. You know, that kind of thing.
It makes sense because I mean, it's when you have a partnership with a company, you do those things. I know that from my past life, that even if you don't have like an official or exclusive distribution in a given country, if you have a relationship with that company, you're apt to send your stuff along with it. So yeah, that would make sense. Jim Catalano was watching. I wonder if we should have had Jim jump in on this. I didn't know if this was hi Jim, first of all, to Jim.
Yeah, hi,
Catalano.
Jim.
Hello.
Hey, Jim.
Jim, if you want to jump in, let me know and I'll shoot you the link. If you Jim and I were just babies though when we're during this time that we're talking about. So
I think Ivor Arbiter had definitely entered into some kind of business relationship in that early 60s period with Paiste, because I can remember them appearing in the shop.
Yeah,
60s. And
absolutely. Even the Paistes that were sold at Drum City, they got their own distinct metal stamp as well.
Mhm.
You know, they were stamped Arbiter London, and
correct.
And the 602s didn't even have the Paiste name on it. It just, you know, it just said Formula 602 at the bottom of the stamp. So, you know, and then some of the other Paiste lines that they sold, they had their own names. You know, the Stambols were called Arbiter Customs instead of Paiste Stambols. So yeah, there's definitely a big time relationship there. And Tomas and Ivor were, from what I've heard, very, very close friends. And that's, you know, how that relationship got started and grew.
very interesting.
John?
Yeah, Gary.
You know, it would be an interesting story that would really relate if you started it out by sharing your cymbal gift to Ringo.
Sure. Yeah. Well, that would be. Thank you, Gary. Yeah, I was going to get to that point and tell you guys. So the first time I met Ringo was in 1995 on an all-star tour gig, and that summer I was working at Zildjian at that time, and that summer we had discovered these new old stock 1940s A Zildjian cymbals in a big metal cabinet in the factory. We were rearranging the factory, and in the process, we came upon this big metal cabinet. No one knew it was inside it. They pried it open, and they were all brand new, unstamped 1940s circa A Zildjians.
Wow.
And these are the cymbals that Zildjian is now selling now in the sort of Armin collection, if you will. So anyway, I got a hold of a set, and I said I want to present these to Ringo when he comes through town this summer. And I feel like it was not long. We discovered these cymbals not long before Ringo was coming through in July of that year, 1995. So I was able to secure a 16-inch crash, a 20-inch ride, and a pair of 14-inch hi-hats to present to Ringo. And I can show you the picture, but anyway, it was during that first meeting with him that I'll never forget. And he was so moved by by this presentation. Myself and Craigie Zildjian were there to do it. And let me see if I can, well, this is a picture of me and Ringo with the, I guess it's the 16-inch crash, which, so I don't know if you can tell by looking at it, but you can see it's the, it's by the lathing and the,
Sure.
and they were, brand new cymbals. So anyway, so at that time, Ringo brought me up behind the kit along with Jeff Chonis, his drum tech, and showed me his cymbal setup and his drums. And at that time, he was playing what I remember to be 2 old A's, and I thought they were 20s. One might have been an 18, but one I think was an 18 and one was a 20, but they were definitely old A's, a pair of old 14-inch hi-hats. And then he had some newer cymbals that I'd sent him. He had the closed hi-hats that he's been playing for some time now on the right, and a newer ride, I think that, like probably an A medium ride or maybe even a K ride. But he had those 2 old A's and the A hi-hats. And I remember he pointed to the 2 cymbals and he said, "These 2 cymbals are from the mid 1960s. And I kind of nodded my head. And then he said, and he pointed to the hi-hats. And he said, "The hi-hats," which I have a picture of, I think. He said, "The hi-hats are from 1960. And I went, I'll try that again. He said, "Are you guys seeing the hi-hats?"
Not the hi-hats. We just saw the 16-inch crash.
Sorry about that. This is all high-tech stuff to me.
You're doing well, John.
He he pointed to the hi-hats and he said, "The hi-hats are from 1960." And you've seen these before, Gary. I know you might have provided this photo, or maybe Jeff. I think it was yourself though.
Are those the hi-hats, John?
Well, okay. So Dave, I said, so those hi-hats, and he cut me off and he said, "They're on all the records." And I went, my mouth hit the floor, really, my jaw hit the floor. And I said, "Can I try them?" And he kind of went, "Yeah." And they were very light feeling, old, not even new beats, but just very light,
Really
responsive hi-hats. Yeah. But I mean, we could go down this rabbit hole because Gary and I,
if there's such a thing as a famous pair of hi-hats, that's
Exactly.
yes, yeah,
That's
exactly.
gotta be it.
I dream
Exactly.
of being in your position here. It's really fascinating. This is the hi-hats.
Now, have you any idea what those marks are, John? The arrows?
I don't, but I think Gary might.
Yeah, no, actually, we really don't know. He's actually has similar markings in pencil on one of the 2 18-inch Zildjian crash rides that he has. And it was speculated, that George may have done that. And then it was speculated also that Paul may have done it for the reason of that being the sweet spot. But we don't.
I found a picture just the other day. It was new to me. And I immediately, yes, that's an interesting gift from Paul, right?
Yeah.
So with that photo, you can probably assume that that's not the crash ride. I assume that's something Paul took for McCartney 1. That cymbal is mine because there's like a picture of him on his back porch, the front bass drum head off, when Paul returned the kit to Ringo finally in 95 or so. I think run Anthology, most likely. He returned the kit and you can tell Paul has these like 2 Zildjians off. I bet you that's one of the things he was returning. But I found a photo just a couple weeks ago from mid 1965. I have this thread on drumforum.org that I've been obsessing over about a day-to-day, month-by-month Ringo cymbal thing. I wish I could add it in the chat right now, but you can see the same pencil marks, excuse me, of the arrows going up and down on the 18-inch crash ride. And so it makes me believe, you know, as much as those guys weren't worrying about cymbals and excuse me, things like that, they knew what sounded great. And that is my biggest influence with this whole search.
Amen.
I feel like Indiana Jones here, but it's that they knew, they worked with what they had, and it made me go immediately back to John's picture with those hi-hats with the pencils, because honestly I was always skeptical just if those were the hi-hats or not, because I love Ringo, but I'm not sure if he really knows. And I've talked to Gary about this a few times too, and you know, no, it's fine. We probably know more about his gear than he ever did, but he knew it sounded great. So when I went back and I'm looking at the picture on Drum Forum of those pencil marks, and it got me thinking that those are the hi-hats after all, that he did something similar on most of his gear. So thank you for posting those photos again, because those have always been interesting to me. And basically with all of this, the cymbal started with the hi-hats for me. It started a genre of music in my mind. You know, why is it opening hi-hat, buttering it? Why was he doing that? Why, you know, and it was all for a reason, musical reasons. But those hi-hats, just I dream about them. I've scoured the internet for photos, and bell shapes on cymbals are always different in photos. That's what kills me. Especially 602s. They're flat in one photo and then they're bulbous in another one. It's like, well, what is it? You know, and
photos have a funny way of messing with cymbals, and you'll get people, you know, you'll say, oh, well, you know, like with Charlie, you know, John a while back posted a picture of Charlie's giant beat, you know, and people were like, oh, well, when I saw him in concert, it was a 24. And in this picture, it's a 22, you know, and it's not a 22. They didn't make a 22-inch giant beat. So it's definitely a 20. But, you know, pictures have a funny way of throwing off the sizes of the cymbals and the bells. And, you know, I think probably because the cymbals are in motion when the picture's snapped, and, you know, that and just the perspective of things throws it off.
Exactly. I'll just, this is great what you guys are saying and adding. And Gary, Astridge and I know we've had this conversation a few times, where I remember us chatting at the Ludwig booth some years ago at the NAMM show about Ringo cymbals. And I think we were both of the mind that sonically we thought he was playing 15s on the older records. Mm-hmm. It just, you know, they just sounded, they had that sort of bigger, more buttery 15 sound. And I just, you know, I remember us saying like, but Ringo said they were, you know, 14, so you can't argue with a Beatle, you know, but to your point, Brendan, you know, I rest his soul, Charlie, I think we've Charlie's famous Maple Gretsch drum set, you know, he referred to it as 1957 Gretsch round badge kit, but I think we've determined, or I say it's been determined that it was maybe a tad bit newer than that, maybe early 60s. But again, who's going to tell Charlie that his drum set's not a 57, you know? So I think in the case of Ringo, I certainly would never contradict Ringo and say, Ringo, you sure you didn't play 15s on Twist and Shout, you know, or you know,
it's always a fine line, you know. Yeah, I want to share another story that you were involved in it, and it somewhat matches the previous one, but for Ringo, you gave him a gift of a Zinn cymbal, right?
Oh, yes.
Okay, yes. So you were kind enough to give me a heads up, and you sent me a picture of it. And so I thought, okay, just in case I'm asked, I better take some ammunition. And I forgot to bring cymbals. And in fact, when I think about it, it was up in, I had to cross Canada, and I was afraid to take anything across to get to Detroit. So when I got there, I had a photo on my phone, which is one that was that I saw in an email, where you see, it's like Ringo sitting behind his kit in '67, and you see the Zinn stamp, see the rivets. So I see Ringo, we talk, and then Greg Bissonette brings up the gift, the Zinn that you gave. And so Ringo says to Jeff Jonas, go get it. So Jeff gets it, brings it out. It's in a bag. He takes it out. And then Ringo's just like, he's got his hands on his hips and he goes, what's a Zin? I go, well, he goes, no, I didn't. I go, no, you did. And he goes, I've never heard of it. And then Greg, I never heard of one either. And then there's a part of me going like, oh, do I just stop talking now?
Yeah.
So the difference is with the one this one right here, you see the logo where it's like it's basically, it has the outline, right? As opposed to the other Zin where it's just like a straight line. Marking saying Zin. So I try to show Ringo on my phone the picture that I had mentioned with him sitting behind a kit, and you can see Zin. So he takes my phone and he's looking at it. We kind of blow up the picture and he's going like, I can't see it. I go, well, no, trust me. I go, saw it on a big screen. I go, it says Zin. And then he was like, oh. So he takes your cymbal and he says, well, let's see what this one sounds like. And then I'm holding it with the hole, my index finger in the hole, and Jeff gives me a stick, and then we're all standing around, Greg was in it included, and then I just look at Ringo and go, why am I hitting it? I go, you hit it, you're the one with the magic touch. And so he hits it, and then we all look at each other, and he's like, yeah, put that away. But it was such a cute moment. But it just showed you that I totally agree. For him, it's what sounded good to him.
Yeah.
To that point, the riveted cymbal wasn't even a super Zin. It was just the regular, basic nickel silver one.
I have one right here too. I can show if we're getting to that part. This is what I use. You can see the pentagon shape of all the rivets, and what really started for me in this was, what symbol is that on Here Comes the Sun that he crashes? Because I use this a lot in my own music, and mics love it. Microphones love this symbol. It is a short.
You've got the other good one then.
Yeah. Well, that's I think it's great. Like you can see. I mean, it's going to be backwards, but there's the logo.
No, I can see it.
Yeah. And
that's what I remember the logo looking like. I don't think I've ever seen that other logo before.
I think the 2 stars were a little later, like 68, 69.
The 2-star ones came out in the late 60s, and then the super Zins were 5-star super Zins then.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And
so
oh,
go ahead. Sorry, Brendan. Yeah.
Oh,
please.
no, nothing.
Well, I was just going to say, after I gave Ringo that cymbal, I managed to get another one. I was able to get another 20, and this one is a super. I bought it from a guy I think he was in Germany or something, and it's pretty good. It's not great by any means, but it looks more like it looks like a sheet bronze cymbal, but sort of more like an A, if that makes sense. It
Definitely.
and it is a super Zin, not a regular Zin. But I've wondered, just to Brendan's point, I've wondered what some rivets would do to this. I'll bet it would make it sound a lot better.
It would make it sound like a riveted cymbal, John.
That's what's funny with Ringo and his history of using rivets was the other fascination that started all this for me was the Ed Sullivan Show, 64. What is that weird umbrella shape looking cymbal? And we still don't know. Sorry, Gary?
Like a Zin to me
I have one I can dig out, a Kamala cymbal, which was also made in England. Dave, I'm not sure if you were ever aware, there was like Samara, Kamala, Zin, Carlton, Beverly, there's Crut as well, and
crap.
Crap, of course.
They were awful.
The thing is what's interesting to me, and I think Todd's helped me with this as well as my friend Sabas in Mexico, who I message about this stuff, is once you realize it really took me back to Premier's chrome usage on their kits. And I'm like, well, I've toured England a bunch. England is small. I mean, to me, being in America, I'm from the Midwest in LA now. England is so small. How many factories could there be pumping this stuff out? And so I have this Zin as well as a Crut that it's the same cymbal, like straight up. It's the same profile, kind of A-ish, kind of weird, 602-ish kind of, it's just the same thing. And so I have a Kamala cymbal. I can dig it out right now. It looks like a lampshade, as well as a Zin that have the same profile, same formula, same everything. It was just stamped depending on what region, maybe Dave or one of you guys, if you know. And that's what's so difficult about this, is that it seemingly is one factory. Premier's Chrome made the chrome for Rolls-Royce.
Right.
What? No wonder their drums are so amazing.
Yeah,
I mean, my old Premier
guess-
drums are, look at the one in the background there, man. It's so shiny and great, you know.
It's in great, it's a early 70s, I think. Yeah, it's in great
So
shape.
in
my
my mind,
guess-
cheap English made gear was just great to me. I love it. So
Yeah,
Tom, what were you
my guess would be Premier made all those cymbals, and they
Mhm.
probably just stamped them for different drum companies that wanted to have their own name, you know, on the cymbals just to sell along with the drums. So
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know, so
I mean, like
So-
for this, it varied. So really quick, sorry, this is
Okay.
this is a
yeah.
Kamala. So if you go back to Ed Sullivan Show and Through Hard Day's Night, he's
That's what it
using
looks
this
like.
Ed Sullivan Show, Through Hard Day's Night. It's this profile
Yeah.
all of a sudden.
Yep.
So this metal, this NS12 is so brittle that it seemed like a crapshoot how it came out, really. And then I had a shout out to a Hollywood Pro Drum. They put in these rivets, kind of like how Mal Evans, I think. But going back to Ringo's usage of rivets, is famously rivets help a cymbal. You know, in my mind, they can make a dog sound great. You know, so just wanted to show that really quick.
Yeah.
very cool.
Yeah. This is a great shot. I'm not sure if Todd or Brendan provided this shot, but I know I've seen this before. This was,
Yeah,
I think, Brendan, you sent this one, right?
Okay, yeah.
That was
Mhm.
awesome, yeah,
And that's during, I think you said during Sergeant Pepper. It's,
Yeah.
It is nerdily enough, it is March 29th, 67. So, and then I love, as much as I love Ringo, I was always wondering what are we hearing on With a Little Help from My Friends? When he goes to this, you know, as a kid, I was like, what is that sound? And when I saw this picture, and what's funny is all these great pictures of the Beatles were all hiding in the same place, the Beatles monthly books that were coming out. So this photo is from then. So what they were recording that day is With a Little Help from My Friends, as well as Being for the Benefit of Mr. Kite. And I perform both of those songs really often. And on a side tangent, I also sent a picture this morning. I think he's also using a 602 during these sessions. Whenever I hear in Benefit of Mr. Kite, that
Yeah.
giant
Yep.
cymbal roar, he loved that 602, because if you listen to how the Beatles, when they were recording through technology, everything was trying to be bigger, warmer. We want a big sound. Ringo's always talking about, I want a big sound. So this photo's strange. It's the only version I can find. Try the other one. That was just to show there's a 20 over there, but you can see the rivets in the Zin
Yeah.
there.
Yep.
There's a weird, I'm trying to find better quality photos every
I think
day.
maybe it's this one. Hang on. one
Maybe in the
second.
Library of Congress, I can see them for real. But I believe he got, in a nutshell, it's a little compressed there, but you can even
You
see
think-
the laid lines in that
On the
20
one on
next
his,
to it.
yeah, the one
on his right. Mhm.
Yeah. Yep. I think you're right. And
And
could
it-
that be the one from Get Back? Excuse me for interrupting. Is that? it
I think
almost-
so. I think so.
Yeah.
You know, as I've noted before, Ringo got what I think is a Paiste custom arbiter, or whatever you call it, the Christmas of 65. I'll just start there. They were about to play a big London show, and the arc of the Beatles gear, that every time they reached a certain level, it's like literally that movie, That Thing You Do. It's just they got better gear as they got more money, as the crowds progressed. So Arbiter sent him a 602 around Christmas. I can send you that photo, but this photo proves that this is really what you're hearing on Sergeant Pepper.
Mhm.
And this Zin is on so many classic songs. It's really mind-boggling and inspiring that they just used what sounded good to them, rather than like, whoa, this is a cheap cymbal. What?
Yeah,
type
yeah,
of thing.
exactly.
It just
And
it
regarding
worked.
the big sound too, obviously, it's him and the way he plays, but Jeff Emerick was a huge part
Mhm.
of that, and you can really hear the compression working on,
Oh, 1,000%. And
those things.
even with the new Get Back documentary, it was mind-boggling to me, as we're all drummers who work in studios and things like that, is they were always asking Glyn Johns, how is it sounding? What does this sound like? And it really was, even down to Paul's bass, about needing more bass and stuff, is that they were really relying on what the sound guys, what the engineers were doing.
Yeah. What's interesting, guys, is that with these pictures that you're showing here, they were taken by a gentleman named Sean O'Mahony, and then he was involved with the Beatles Monthly, and he's since passed, but his son-in-law contacted me a number of years ago, and he said that they had archives of photos that his father-in-law took from 63 all the way to 67.
Wow.
So because I was
Wow.
doing what I was doing, he said, confidentially, he goes, I can share some photos. What are you looking for? So I said, anything with drums and cymbals, even if you crop it out. So I have a lot of these in super high res.
Wow.
So
Okay.
yeah, cymbal stamps and everything. But
Wow,
Yeah.
that's amazing.
what I'm working on now is a documentation for a book. So a lot of what you're seeing here will be in it. So but it's very defining. And I'm sorry to say that it's confidential right now, but it's just the
Yeah, no,
I love that, man. I love
totally
that.
understand, Gary. Yeah, and
More power
and
to it.
I just think, to me, it's fascinating. I think what that film did for me, just in terms of opening my eyes to, again, I thought he always played an 18 and a 20. I didn't know he played 220s. So that little tidbit, probably you guys all knew that, and I'm maybe the only one here that didn't know that. But I just, when I saw that he had 220s up, I thought, okay, well, that makes a lot of sense now. That the sound that I'm hearing on these records, I would have never thought you'd get an 18 to sound as big. Like Here Comes the Sun, for example, which was not those sessions, but it would make sense that it was that Zin that I thought was maybe a 20-inch thin A crash, making that big whooshy,
John,
sizzly.
the other thing that's worth dialing in is when some of these cymbals were selected initially, you're really talking about a player looking for volume.
right.
Mm-hmm.
Is that
Music
how-
was getting heavier.
You
Yeah.
have to kind of
Yeah.
upend all the stuff that we've all learned over the last years, and just go put yourself, I mean, when I go back to that period and what I was looking for in my ignorance, and I'm not saying, I'm not implying anybody was ignorant, I'm just saying that it was just so basic. It was like I was saying to you earlier, it was like what was available, and all that stuff, all the inverted commas good cymbals initially weren't available in the front end of the 60s. And it's okay, let's find something that sounds good and is loud.
Loud, right?
I mean, we're one step further on from the big band drummers, where there's no microphones on the drums. There's still,
Right.
I mean, we've all seen the footage of them in the early days. It's unbelievable. There's, the mics on the drums are the one that's stuck in between his stool and his snare drum for him to sing his song. It's
Maybe
it's
an
difficult
overhead
for
but-
people to kind of contemplate that. But so it's like, oh yeah, I need some loud cymbals. Oh, 20, yeah, that one's going to be louder than an 18.
Yeah.
And
Well, I
Let's
was
find one
gonna
that sounds good.
I think you're right, Dave. And my theory on that, I think you're exactly right. And my theory has always been that he got used to playing those bigger cymbals.
Exactly.
And then when they went to record, he just sort of because by the time the mid 60s came along, they were really done playing live, and they'd become a studio band. And he could have then adjusted to maybe if he wanted smaller crashes, but I think he heard that sound, and that was their sound, was the bigger crashes, the more decaying.
And Jeff Emerick and Glyn and all those guys made it work.
Yeah.
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 Once they got the Fairchild compressor, I feel like that 18 all of a sudden sounds like a 20,000 inch cymbal.
Yes, exactly.
And so that, the compression first heard, beginning on Rubber Soul and things like that. You can even hear the very last hit on Nowhere Man. You just automatically get this whoosh. And I've nerdily obsessed about this in studios with my own bands. And we could use a tiny cymbal and all of a sudden it's just whoosh, through an 1176. I can't afford a Fairchild, but 1176, which is a great compressor. And it almost didn't matter what you were using. It was such an artificial sound, and that's what they were really going after. And, the Motown music they were listening to was very crispy, and they were going for that. And it brings me back to the hi-hats. I asked Bunny Carlos, who should really do one of these too, but I asked Bunny Carlos, I was like, so what was it like seeing the Beatles? I'm in his drum lair and he shows me his Superphonic he used with John Lennon. And I was talking to me, he goes, all I could hear was, and I'm thinking he's going to say girls screaming. He goes, those hi-hats. That's all I heard. And I'm like, what? And he saw them, I forgot, probably Chicago Stadium or something in 64, 65. And so it begs me to think those hi-hats weren't as, I've talked to Gary about this too, they weren't as thin as people. They were perfect. They weren't thin or heavy or medium. They were just like perfect. And that's what, them wanting a louder sound over people. It makes me wonder, same with the 18 cymbal that we hear throughout Help. It's such a loud instrument, really, really loud. And that makes me think the weight distribution was heavier in the middle, and then they thinned out closer to the edge. And for me, that's always what I'm looking for, a light touch where I don't have to bash, so.
Yeah.
It's interesting to talk about hi-hats. Just like you, Brendan, how we're just so obsessive, just looking, if you saw the wasted cymbals I have just stacked up that I bought, and it's like, this isn't it,
Yeah.
And, but the point is, I was searching online and on YouTube, I come across this this clip of a Stag medium thin 14-inch crash, and then so I listened to it and I went, oh my God, this sounds like Ringo's top hi-hat. It was just like really explosive to the touch. It was very bright, and yet when he hit it, it had the same exact tone that Ringo, how he, when he would go from a wash and then just hit it before he went to a fill. And so I started buying those. And then it's like, okay, I'm not getting the sound that I heard on that YouTube clip. And then I went to go take 12 of them back, and they said, dude, you can't just buy these and return them, so that was a whole other.
Nice, man. Yeah, we've all been.
I started being convinced that, what, he has something really unique, because these were very loud too when you just matched them up as hi-hats. So, but it was like, what is out there that sounds like that? Especially in 63, 60, like when they were doing a lot of the recordings for the BBC, they were just so Beatley, and to me they're a little different than what he was using later on. But it was just my opinion. But it's just a road. Once you go down it, man, you're lost.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, I hear you.
I know. Well, then, so to that point, it was eye-opening to me to watch the film and see a 602 bottom, sound edge bottom, at least at that point, anyway, during those sessions and on the rooftop show. So he had either put an A Zildjian top on a 602 sound edge bottom, or it was a sound edge 602 set, and the top was very patinaed, but it really looked like an A. The top really looked. If you look at
that would be my opinion of the hi-hat setup there.
Yeah,
he stayed with what was comfortable, but always trying new things. Was kind of the thing with them. So
yeah.
Oh, and speaking of new things, here I have got this. I just wanted to show.
Oh, look at that!
I used to have one of those.
Well, I was looking forever. I mean, and I found this, and then never saw another one. So
Gary, is it plastic, Gary, or is it wood?
No, it's all aluminum.
It's aluminum. Okay.
Strangely enough, today a friend of mine named Tam Rakin up in Scotland. He sent me some information because it was like, who made these? And it's in a Dallas Arbiter catalog from 1969. And this is
Wow.
called Tamba-Ching.
Wow.
And if
Okay.
you saw the way it could be used, you see how Ringo uses it, but you'll see that there's also a hole here, 2 holes actually. There's one on the bottom where you could actually put this on a bass drum. You just take out the beater,
Yeah.
put it through, tighten it.
Right.
and then-
Oh, wow. I never knew that.
or
That's
you could put
crazy.
it on or you could put it on a post and just and shake it. So
It's amazing when you go back, like I do. I don't know if any of you guys geek out on this stuff as much as I do, but when you go back and you look at the old drum catalogs from the 30s and 40s and 50s, and how much like really cool hardware and things that we take for granted as being modern now, as far as things like that, and little stands to mount things on the bass drum and stuff like that. They had all that stuff back then. It was just very, thin and cheaply made. And then, when I was growing up in the 70s and the 80s, you didn't really see all that stuff. So when it came out again, like drum racks and all these little parts and bits and bobbles, everybody's like, oh, that's new. That's from the 90s. That's when people started using that. But the drummers back in the 30s and 40s and 50s, they had all that stuff, already.
Yeah.
And then it just kind of went away, I guess, in the 70s. And, then
Not for
everything
some of
was
us.
new again.
Not for all of us. It didn't go.
Yeah.
Not for all of us. Yeah. Hey,
there was one other thing that I wanted to mention.
Yeah.
I hope you guys know this, but Ringo did a master class. If you go
Saw
to
that.
masterclass.com, it came out on the 22nd of this month. And Greg Bissonette was heavily involved in putting together questions to ask Ringo. And he was kind enough to pull me in. So if you watch that, if you hear what Ringo says about drumming, and then when you watch the documentary, then it's like, God, is Ringo bored? Is he even listening to what's going on? But his mind obviously was working, because when my thought with the documentary, we've heard these songs hundreds, if not thousands of times. So, but if you could erase that, and you're just watching this group that's like spiritually connected, just creating songs in a short period of time, and then seeing what hearing what the final product is. And when you focus on Ringo, what he's doing is so unique. I mean, it's, like with the using the towels. And by the way, here quickly, if you watch Masterclass, these are the towels he used. And this is bongos.
Those are impossible to find.
Oh yeah, trust me. Yeah, that I know. But
I do. I trust you.
That he played those, and I have them, so it's a nice gift. But you got to
I'm
watch.
gonna watch it. Yeah, I'm going to watch it this weekend. My wife has a subscription to it. I want to read a comment, Gary, that's tees up this perfectly, from Lee Flyer, who's always good with some great comments, and I think a couple of you guys know Lee. This is what he wrote. The impression I get from an audio perspective in Get Back is that he got a lot of those sounds by putting towels over the drums and hitting them hard, which then brought out the cymbals and made them sound explosive when he hit them, along with the compression, of course. Does that sound accurate? And I would agree with that. I think if nothing else, whether it was his idea or Glenn John's idea or George Martin's idea to put the tea towels on there, it allowed him to play I never realized how tight a space it was that they were working when they were at Twickenham, and then later at Apple, how on top of each other they were. I guess just from photos, I assumed there was a little more separation between the drums and the rest of the band. But as we saw in the movie, there wasn't. So the tea towel was a great idea because it allowed him to, we all know what it's like when you have to try to play really soft, except Dave Mattacks can do this effortlessly. But I know when I try to play softly, but still try to, play dynamically, it's difficult. So, and not to say that Ringo couldn't play dynamically, but it was a great way to not have the drums be too loud, but still be able to play those things he needed to play that involved hitting the drums hard in certain spots. So anyway, that was my take on that.
That's interesting you mentioned that. And I feel like Ringo was very rudimentary and he didn't even know it. I feel like because I've always noticed, even from the early days, his drum heads are black by the end of sessions. And I'm like, how's it all so dirty? I know they were gigging all the time. I know that. But once you think about what they were doing, until they really started to rehearse and gear up for each take, Ringo's on brushes. And that was a thing I noticed in the new documentary was how he's playing on brushes most of the time. Even Heather, Paul's little daughter, comes over and starts jamming with him on hi-hats with his brushes. And they were pumping his drums through the PA with brushes on. And it just goes to show you how they worked and how the discipline that would take. And brushes, as we all know, my dad growing up, when I was first started playing, he was always like, brushes, brushes, brushes. It wasn't like a noise in the house thing. My parents were cool about it, but it was a technique thing. And I feel like that's something drummers don't do anymore. Most drummers I know don't even know what brushes are, I feel like. But that was a thing I took away from he was playing brushes with tea towels on For You Blue. It finally kind of proved it. He was on brushes with that. And I just took that because they had to sing in the same room together, so of course he's going to be on brushes into a PA. I thought that was interesting.
Well, what was interesting about it, that recording is that nobody's wearing headphones.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
I know. Yeah.
And you can hear Glenn Johns go, Ringo, do you, this, my eyes and ears were like so wide. He goes, Ringo, do you have dampening on that floor tom? And I'm like, that's the first time I've ever seen someone actually notice, or because at Twickenham, he's wide open. When they first go there, you can see Glenn start popping up, putting the tea towel over the snare, kind of doing the sound for him. And that was interesting to me on a side tangent, wondering if there was a calfskin on Ringo's snare by the time they hit Twickenham, but there was footage of it clearly being plastic. And I've always read, he even said, he goes, we put calfskins, later on towards the end of the Beatles or whatever, but I've seen no evidence of that, of course. But
what I was told by Dick Shorey was that when the Maple was ordered, it was ordered with calfskin heads. And,
interesting.
And it appears that when they knew they were going to be playing at Twickenham, or it would be cold, big.
Okay.
Pop them out.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That's a great point. I never thought about that. Mm-hmm.
Well, what I'd love to
Drum
just
City, Gary, is it your understanding that Drum City put the calf heads on that kit?
No, it came that way from Ludwig.
Oh, okay.
However, they shipped it.
Right.
But yeah,
Okay.
it was ordered that way.
Very cool too to see the Drum City stickers on the toms on the kit. It's very cool.
Yeah. Jim Catalano had asked that question. I was just about to say that those stickers, Jim, that you're referring to were the Drum City stickers that they stuck on there. So not wanting to miss out on an opportunity. Very smart.
Definitely.
Yeah, Dave.
That's Ivor.
Yeah.
Oh, it's interesting, guys. When I documented the kit, all the stickers were off, and then when I got to the bass drum, there was a Drum City sticker, the same one you see on the toms. It was underneath.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the top part of the bass, on the inside.
Amazing.
Was the inventory stickers on there? Because you see a little plastic. It looks like they were doing
it's
policy stuff.
Those are off now too. We did some research and we knew that they were put on for inventory, but nobody knows where the book is. So yeah.
And those drums were stamped. They were in 68. That's when he got that kit.
1960. Yeah, he got it in September of 68, but they were made in July of 67.
Yep.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
Okay. And he used that kit not entirely in the White Album, right? It was during that?
At the tail end. In fact, the day he got the kit was the day that they were recording the song Glass Onion. And then Paul being there, you could see how Paul was an influence too in telling Ringo, hey, do this or try this. So might have been Paul's influence to try a double bass, because that's what Ringo did for Glass Onion. So never kept the tape. and it just didn't work. So
George even mentions in the new documentary, he goes, "So why don't you grab that double bass again like you used to?"
Mhm.
Which I found was interesting. That was kind of nerdily mind blowing that
You're
you thought
right.
about that. And,
Yeah.
you
There
know,
was, there was, Dave, wait till you see it. There's so much stuff in there that like,
Yeah, I'm only halfway through so far, and the first half has been amazing.
yeah, it's just, it's
It-
amazing. Just,
John, there's even another point too, is like when you're watching it, I mean, it's just something you got to watch a numerous amount of times, because you could be listening to a conversation and they're kind of focusing, say, like on John or something, but then you look in the background and it's like there's Ringo's Oyster Black Pearl kit sitting in the background and there's a chrome snare drum, the one that came with the maple kit.
yep.
Like, wow.
yeah,
So
I know. And, I want to jump to Dave for 1 second. We talked about this off the air, but I'd love to just have you talk a little bit, Dave. We were talking about having recorded with Paul McCartney on several records. From your perspective, what you see in the film, which you'll see when you watch it, is so many songs that Paul is like writing on the spot, basically, that he's got an idea. There are a bunch of songs from Abbey Road that he's getting the idea for, that we don't hear on Let It Be, that we hear later, but it's the germ of the idea. And, Ringo's writing Octopus's Garden and those types of things. So when you worked with Paul, did he often come in with a fully formed song and just kind of go, this is how it goes? Or would you guys, would he help? Would you all sort of be there while the song was written and have it evolve that way? I'd just be curious to see if that was always his process.
Both, John. As we talked briefly before we went live, the sessions at Air Studios in London, when it was in Oxford Street before it went up to Hampstead, those were the first sessions I did. And then there was the Montserrat sessions, and then there was also the sessions at his place in Sussex, and then Abbey Road sessions as well. But I do remember sometimes it would be, yeah, it goes like this, learn it. Other times he'd have very much the basis of the idea and one input. But I think what is pertinent to this conversation was when I did some of the tracks on Run Devil Run. Ian Pace is on the bulk of it, but I'm on, I can't remember now, 3 or 4. And they were all done at Abbey Road, and Paul deliberately wanted to kind of semi-recreate the vibe from the first album, the first Fabs album. And that was what was standard back in the day for everybody. And that's, you went in at 10 o'clock in the morning, you broke for lunch at 1 for an hour, and then you did 2 to 5, and then you did 6 to 9. I mean, session work back in the day, it started off like that, apart from jingles, which were an hour. And the classic thing was, oh yeah, 10 to 1, 2 to 5, 6 to 9. And he wanted to recreate that. But the thing about the Run Devil Run sessions was no overthinking. No overthinking. Let's not, if somebody's got a good idea, let's do it. And Dave came up with some good ideas on guitar. Dave Gilmore came up with some good ideas on guitar, keyboard player, and everyone would contribute. And one of the things that I remember very fondly was, and this is after working with him for quite some time, we finished one track and I said, what do you think about Rackers on that? He went, yeah, right, you, me, middle of the studio. And Jeff, come down. Jeff puts up a 67 or whatever in the middle of the room. He said, right, you stand one side, I'm standing the other. Right, Cans, let's go, come on, right, 1, 2, 3, 4. And it's, I'm playing the maracas with Paul McCartney in Abbey
That's
Road.
amazing.
And that was after having known him for kind of 10, 15 years and still had done a lot of sessions, but it was still a cool thing. Yeah, that's a good idea. Let's do that.
Yeah.
Let's do that. And then other people, and I think maybe I did also contributed an idea. I said, no, I don't think that's going to work. Let's not do that. And the idea was to get at least 2 songs the basics of but when I say the basics, I don't mean kind of the basics and then we're going to spend 3 years overdubbing, blah, blah, blah. He really wanted them close to finished as possible. And we got those done. All those tracks, apparently, the ones with Ian Pace were all done like that. It was like, you know, let's get on with doing it. Just to, you know, no fixing. If there really was a bum note, yeah, then, you know.
Yeah.
But basically, we're not going to spend hours and hours editing and carefully overdubbing them. Let's just get it in live. And I think that record in particular comes across quite well that way. I think there's definitely a spirit. Not that the others aren't exciting or anything, blah, 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 but that sense of immediacy of I'm going to sound really old school now. Bunch of people singing and playing at the same time who can sing and play. You know, playing time.
Yeah, what a concept.
Yeah, what a concept. Yeah, and all at the same time too. You know, which is not that there's anything wrong with one at a time. I mean, everybody's doing it. I'm doing it. We all know how to do one at a time and build. But there's still something that happens when you get musicians together, and I think that record captured it. I mean, like I said, I'm not on many tracks. I did All Shook Up and a couple. Anyway, blah blah. So
what year was that, Dave? I was just curious. What year?
That's back end of the 90s.
Yeah. Okay. I was going to say
back end of the 90s sometime. It was in a couple of years before I came over here.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I was going to say it was quite a bit later than what we're talking about now.
Yes. Oh yeah.
Just because I'm sorry. No, that was the whole thing. We were at the back of the night, and he says, I really want to try and get the bulk of a record done the way we did that first one, because as everybody, I'm sure you guys all know, and I would imagine that most people do, that first record. Was it done in a day or a day and a half or 2 days? I mean, literally. I think a day.
Straight to two. I mean, it wasn't even 4-track then. Straight to
right.
Yeah.
I think it was a matter of hours. I really do. I think it was
if it wasn't done in a day, it was like a day and a half or
something. Isn't the story that John's they were going to do Twist and Shout the next day or something, but John said
his voice was shot and they pushed him. They pushed him. Yeah.
And you know, that song wouldn't sound as great as it does.
Oh my God. I remember the first time, I'm sure we all remember the first time we heard that, like as Mr. Cooder would say, chicken skin music.
I gotta say, you know, and I'm preaching to the choir, but I think one of you guys had just said this. It might have been you, Gary, that, you know, we've heard these songs a million times. And I said this the other day, like all the rooftop concert, you know, the Let It Be, I saw bits and pieces of the original Let It Be movie, and of course have owned the record for, you know, 50 years. And so heard those recordings a million times, but when you see them playing live, there's something, and you guys that have seen it, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, there's this element of like unbelievable appreciation
for each other.
Yeah. And for them, I mean, when you see them performing these songs live and how they get to that point, the fact that it's 3 weeks of kind of getting almost nowhere for 2 of those 3 weeks. One of the guys quits the band during that time.
It's very tedious that
oh my God,
part of that.
It's this close to imploding, like on several occasions. And then they go out to the rooftop and they sit down and they play their asses off. I mean, they just, you know what I mean? It's like, it's the quintessential, like playing for the red light. That red light's on and they're so pro and they're all such great musicians and such a great unit. And it's almost like, I don't know, I can't explain it, but it's like they defaulted to all those years of playing together. That just came out. Especially Ringo.
A contributing factor, I'm going to chip in here, John. I don't think it can be overestimated what all that time in Germany did for all of them.
For sure.
In terms of making them, you know, it's that thing about where we're in an ideal situation that we're all of us are in varying degrees, where you transition from a bunch of good musicians playing together, and then in an ideal world, after a certain amount of time, the whole becomes greater than the sum of the parts. And I think they reached that
Absolutely.
in Germany. So by the time they, the overnight fame in England,
Yeah.
they had all that. They were a unit. I'm sure you've all seen that great story that Paul talks about when the first time they played with Ringo, and they basically the three of them look at each other and go,
That's it.
He's oh, he's the guy. Yeah.
No,
with all due respect to a certain Mr. Best, I mean, it just upped the ante.
Yeah, I just and Ringo, I mean, every they would do all these takes of Get Back and different songs, and his playing was so consistent every time. The tempo, the feel, everything. It made me, I mean, I've loved the guy forever, but it made me love him 100 times more watching, you know what I mean? I can't explain, I can't put it into words. I think you
totally,
guys have
man.
seen it. Yeah. It was amazing to see him so, I wouldn't say businesslike, that's not the right word, because it sounds like he didn't have any emotion, because that certainly wasn't the case, but it was almost like so effortless for him to just sit there and deal with sometimes some bullshit, but just sit there and play his part. And it was perfect. He was perfect every time.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, their guitar might be out of tune on this take and they'd have to redo it, or they'd flub up the vocal this time or something, or there'd be a weird feedback, but Ringo was always nailed it every time.
I think the other defining thing, and again, I'm going to sound like an old fart here, when those four guys started, I think they knew they were all onto something, but I don't think it was like, we're all going to become great rock stars. They just knew that they just knew that they had something, and they needed to work at it. It wasn't a showbiz thing. It wasn't a rock star thing. It was, I mean, they were all standing on their shoulders to varying degrees. And I think that from what little I've seen, and I'm behind the curve with you guys, who are catching up with us, but I'm looking forward to seeing this. But from my recollection of watching the original Get Back movie, that's what comes across. It's just four people. I know it's oversimplification, but four people just who know how to write songs and play music, doing it together with a lot of love and respect for each other. It's not uncommon.
Well, and the thing is, they really knew each other. I mean, look at it. I mean, you were touring, they were together all the time. The four of them being together, it was like their world. They could rip each other if they wanted to, however they worked. But if you were an outsider and tried to do it, they'd attack you. So
right, yeah.
Paul told me words to that effect many times. Yeah, he said I remember one conversation we had. He was saying about they kind of felt sorry for Elvis, and I said, "What did you mean?" He said, "Well, he just had Elvis and all the hangers on." He said, "We had each other."
Yeah,
that's beautiful. Yeah. Yeah.
He said, we had each other to if anyone got too kind of above themselves, you're out of order kind of thing. And he said Elvis just had a bunch of kind of, we love you, Elvis kind of, even although some of them were his close friends. But and I think that's that. I don't think I'm telling anyone or saying anything that's kind of
pop stars are lucky to have any friends,
Yeah, exactly. Well, God, we're over an hour now, so I appreciate you guys spending time and again doing this so last minute. We didn't even talk about Billy Preston, who was just, and Dave, I know you already know this, but when you'll see it in the film, just what, right there.
The glue.
The glue. What he brought was, I mean, again, maybe you guys already knew this. I don't claim to be the biggest Beatles expert, but I didn't know that. My take on it, and correct me if I'm wrong, is he just sort of he just sort of showed up at the session. He was in town in London, and he popped in to say hi to the guys because they knew him from Hamburg in 1962. And then he ends up recording. I mean, it wasn't like he was it wasn't like Nicky Hopkins. It wasn't like a hired, like, oh, Billy's showing up at 10 for the session tomorrow. It was like, oh, Billy Preston's here. Hey, Billy, you feel like playing piano on a couple of songs? It was like,
It was like meant
my-
to be, you know?
it was meant to be. And then once he did that, it was like they all, I mean, before him, that was when it was almost imploding. And then he
Mhm.
just saved the day. They should have a big
Yeah.
cape with a,
It's much like Clapton. Yeah. Like
Number
Clapton
five.
coming in for, you know, the last album during the White Album. They just all kind of got their shit in order right when a guest shows up. And it's kind of sad when you think about it. It's a little sad when we're watching, we know the fate of the band, that they needed like an outsider guy. But man, what an outside guy. You know, I feel like George was sniffing around like the A&R man for Apple. So he was probably telling Billy, he goes, you know, we're looking to release maybe your record. I'll produce it, you know, type thing.
Yeah, George was working the Apple angle. It was pretty funny to see that, you know. That
Really
was
funny,
something
yeah.
They all had a
Probably because
vested
they needed
interest.
money. They wanted their money, and it's probably an easy option, you know.
Probably.
Yeah.
John, did you catch, you know, being like a huge Stones fan like I am, did you catch that one scene like about an hour into part 2 where they first are in Apple and they're kind of rehearsing a little bit and John's holding the Beggar's Banquet album? Did you
Yes.
notice that?
I
And
did.
He opens it up and he puts it right back down.
It puts his cigarettes on it, and coffee.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I said to my wife, I said, you know, this was January 69. Beggar's Banquet came out in, I think, November of 68 or sometime around that time. So it was like the newest Stones record. Yeah. Yeah. And then of course he kept doing the intro for his, you know, rock and roll circus thing, his bit, like he's like, and now the Rolling Stones, you know.
Yeah,
sort of
like 10 times.
yeah. I mean, there was some funny stuff there with that. And
Yeah, but
one last thing
definitely,
too,
I think Gary pointed this out earlier, you know, if you just not kind of take focus off of them once in a while, you'll catch all these little interesting things, you know, going on in the background.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Well, we touched on this off the air, and I'll just quickly mention that I think we all saw that Zilco flyer or advert that was on the piano next to Billy Preston at some point, I think in part 2. And so, Brendan, my question is it possible that 18, what you call the cymbal, could that have been a Zilco, or is that did he just have a bunch of stuff in there and one of them was a Zilco? And
you know, I looked this up after I saw that. I think someone online saw it before me. I only finished the documentary last night, and what I found was that the Zilco they're talking about there, the specific ones, only started around 68, 69. So it's a kind of a no-brainer once you view their arc of gear, that they were kind of getting the first dibs on gear a lot of the time. Ringo's snare drum was like basically one of a kind, you know, one of 5. A lot of their gear was very not custom, but like the first ones off the floor, Paul's Rickenbacker, things like that. And what I looked up is that I don't think it's possible. I have my own on V18. If it was a Zilco, it's going to be the Constantinople Zilcos that they made in the 50s. Those are different beasts. They were known as seconds, but not really. I've heard a bunch of great ones online. There's a great one on Reverb right now. That was like, wow, this is very Ringo-y. And I've just never seen a stamp on the 18. There's so many photos. Even last night, there's a camera guy right over it on the rooftop. I was like, come on, give it to me. And I still didn't see one. And
come on, give it to me.
I know, come on, man. And I don't think it is. If it was a Constantinople. And if you look at the stamps, they still have that weird like pirate sword as the logo, even in the late 50s.
Yeah.
And then not to be confused with the Zilcos with a K, which were Paiste origin, which were, you know,
those were
Todd, if you know,
those were brass cymbals they made them from the very late 40s when they first started making cymbals again after World War II, up until the late 50s.
So it seems like there's a lot of new gear lying around the floor in the new documentary, and I feel like someone just like the Drum City took the opportunity to give a little leaflet about what was starting in 68, 69, and it was in Canada, like you mentioned, John, earlier.
68 is when they opened that factory in New Brunswick.
Okay,
Sure.
Dave, you're right. Yeah.
Ah,
That's
So
Here we go.
yeah, so I don't think it is. I feel like at this point, my personal thing is that it's an unstamped Zildjian, no stamp. I'm just, that did happen.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
played with a guy the other night. I was like, what was that ride? He goes, I don't know. It doesn't have a stamp. And I'm like, dang, sounds good. It gets me thinking through real life experiences with this stuff. And I don't think it's associated, but with the Zilco thing, I'm still doing research on Ringo post Beatles. Let's just say like the BB King sessions, the Doris Troy sessions, things like that. There's a couple symbols in his thing that I'm like, that doesn't look right. It doesn't look like anything. Even in Abbey Road, there's a couple of photos where I'm just like, that doesn't look like anything I've seen before, type of thing, which could be, I'm still doing research on it, but the Zilcos could have showed up post Beatles or Abbey Road, but I wouldn't say the 18. I call it an 18, but my other thing is I think it's slightly over an 18 is my other. I have an amazing, really quick.
It could be, yeah.
Actually, John, you were probably working with Zildjian heavily on this. This cymbal I'll take to my grave with me. It's a 2004 Armand.
Oh yeah,
The baby.
beautiful
baby. And
19.
I'll show you guys personally some videos I've done. I do Beatle covers on YouTube that I've used, and this 19, it's even patinaed like him, even the lathe here, how it gets thinner. It sounds exactly like his, even down to this classic Zildjian, whatever the hammering is. I'm not sure what it's called, but it's just like it.
I'm in full
Close, and it's not a thin
Yeah.
cymbal. It's just, I think like the weight distribution it's not the thinnest edge here. And one day I'll show you guys in person, but
Did you take the rivets out, Brendan?
I did for this. And I'll send you a recording I did of Come Together at a studio with tape, Fairchild, everything. And I love LA. It has the best studios, man. I go into studios, they already know what I want. My friend Clay owns a great studio, and I'll show you some recordings I have on this, but it made me wonder if his 18 was just like slightly more, just like the hi-hats. It takes me back to arguing about John Bonham's bass drum size online for the past 20 years. And it turned out his bass drum wasn't a 26 by 14 or a 16. It was a 26 by 15, some rare, one of a kind thing. So it made me wonder.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's a dorky. This guy, George Flutis, is a Bonham expert, amazing player in Chicago.
George plays Bonham like nobody I've ever seen play Bonham.
I've seen him play the jazz greats as well in Chicago at the Jazz Showcase.
Fantastic drummer.
He's influenced me to get into all this cymbal stuff, and it's like, well, if just goes to show you never quite know. Maybe we're all close to something, but I just feel like Ringo's 18 was just a hair bigger, just to get that roar. I've just never heard an 18 that has that roar. Same with the hi-hats. What if they were 14 and a quarter? It's like, we're all wrong. It's in between 14 and 15,
Well, the big revelation there was
back then too. I don't think they were as precise with the sizing on things as they are nowadays too. So that could be
Gary's big revelation with the snare drum, the Ringo snare drum.
Yeah,
exactly.
Right, his was a 5.5.
Yeah.
And the standard depth for that model was a 5, and
was a 5.
Ringo made that half-inch difference. So.
Yeah, no, I remember hearing that. Yeah. It always
like
looked
based
bigger
on
than a 5 in the pictures. Yeah.
Sure. And it was based on the Barrett Deems model, but had a different strainer, just a.
Yeah, that's a whole other show.
Yeah, that's a whole other.
Guys,
that's tomorrow's discussion.
That's tomorrow. This has been so great. I want to thank you guys. I want to read a quick comment from a friend of mine, Stephen Pilata, a great guitar player here in the Boston area.
He's not in a coma. He's a guitarist. He's not in a coma.
He's very interested in drums. He's a student of music.
Okay.
My friend Stephen, but really fine guitar player. And he said, but what he pointed out in everyone but Dave has seen this, but he said Paul and John singing an entire track of two of us through clenched teeth was hilarious. And I forgot about that. That was I kept thinking at some point they were going to break but they didn't. They got through the whole song. Like with the teeth like just singing it.
drooling and all. That was
Yeah.
hilarious.
It was
Especially
crazy.
on the calendar day. They're like one
I
more
know.
day to the show,
I
and they're
know.
still, messing
I know.
around and stuff.
It's,
Another
it's
funny
amazing.
moment from the show was right in the beginning where they're talking about, they're talking about doing this, doing the live performance in Tripoli or wherever. And they're like, well, Ringo doesn't want to go abroad. And it's like, well, it's just going to be us and Jimmy Nicol then.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Woof.
Yeah.
Tough crowd.
That was a pretty
Tough
funny
crowd.
line. Those guys were
But-
pretty funny.
Yeah, that's the stuff you can, like you were saying, you can take the piss out of your bandmates, but
Yeah.
an outsider doing that, forget it. They'll cut you down,
So somebody should do a I've heard he didn't really ever want to talk to the press, but somebody should do a documentary on Jimmy Nicol. That's a very, very interesting story.
No one knows where he is. He seems to have disappeared off the face of the earth as far as
Wow.
I mean, there's
I probably
definitely
would
something
too.
there, like what a story, to be a Beatle for that short period of time, and that's
Yeah.
a pretty crazy story.
It's better than most people's lives, those
Yes, exactly.
those couple weeks. But
I had known that story when I was younger and forgot about it and relearned the whole thing again. I was like, wow, that's really something.
and then one of the last kind of nerdy notes I want to say, if I've had this for a while, and I noticed Ringo playing something like it in
I was going
the
to ask about
new
that little
documentary.
people.
I've had there's a bootleg series called 30 Days that I've had, and there was these green CDs. There's like 30 of them had growing up, and you can hear him crashing this little like weird baby cymbal, and I always wondered, it was always positioned like this, and see if you can see it. It looks Paiste. There's something about Paiste bells where you can always kind of
Yeah.
tell.
Yeah.
And so I've had this lying around, of course, and it has a little moon and star on it. This is an 8-inch,
Yeah.
and I also have like a 4-inch version.
Really
It's
interesting. But
kind of a
back then-
children's symbol.
Back then I was going to say Paiste used to make children's symbols, and they're in some of the price sheets I have from the 60s
Sure.
and early 70s. So that's probably what it is.
It makes it seem like there's just a big Paiste shipment one day, and Ringo's like, great, and in the early, also in the first episode, you can see, I'll send you guys a photo, you can see another 602 in the background. And one of my friends hit me up specifically about McCartney 1 drums on what was being used, and I'm pretty sure Paul just took Ringo's 602s from the shack at Abbey Road or wherever they really catch their gear, and use those. So you can see another 602. I think, Todd, I did send you that one, but
Wow.
no stamps, no proof. It looks exactly like how this one is in the background. It's that shine. My 602 here is from right when they introduced him again in 2011, and it hasn't patinaed at all. It's my most used cymbal. It just goes to show you can really point out the shine and the care that Paiste used. But on this
that's the small cymbal that you saw
Mhm.
Ringo playing. You'll hear it in one song that I'm aware of at the 1 minute mark on Here Comes the Sun.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
There's like a little unknown little.
And there's also a good chance that cymbal may have come with that little white, maybe you can't say the word today in today's world, but he had that Japanese midget drum kit, the white pearl one that you see.
the toy, like a toy set.
Yes.
Yeah.
That could have came with it.
Yeah, that is true.
Yeah. It probably did. I don't know if you guys caught the other day. I'll just on this note, I did this show on Monday, my last, what I think is going to be my last Remembering Charlie Watts show. Jim Keltner, Vinnie Colaiuta, Aaron Comis, and Pete Thomas.
Couldn't
And
get
so
anyone
I asked-
good, John.
I couldn't get anybody good, so I rang those guys up at the last minute, and of course
They
were
all
free.
suck.
So I asked Jim, because I've heard through the years and through the grapevine that Ringo had gifted him one or some of his old 602s.
Mhm.
And I just was on this sort of bender of 602 mania after seeing the film. And so I asked Jim the other day, and he said, "Where'd you hear that?" And but so the answer is he doesn't have the cymbals or a cymbal, which I
Yeah.
was certain that he did, because I feel like somebody I thought knew something told me that, but
There was a story saying that Ringo gave a pair of 602s to George, and George had them in his home studio, and that's what Jim would use every time he was there, and he took
Yeah.
them with him.
Yeah, that's the
That's-
story. They
and
went
Jim
to
was-
George.
There
and
was
then
a
went
there
to
was a
Jim.
Ludwig kit in
Yeah.
when I was recording with George. There was a Ludwig kit and some cymbals in his home studio that I remember, but I don't remember much about them.
well, Jim didn't mention that, but that's probably what it was. But he remembered that the cymbal, he had only just started, or he was about to watch Get Back. He hadn't seen it yet. But when I mentioned the medium ride to Ringo's left, he said, "Oh, I remember that cymbal." He said, "That's what got me interested in those cymbals back then." He said, I was always a Zildjian guy up until then. And hearing Ringo's cymbals is what made me kind of pay attention to Paiste. So it was, again, pretty eye-opening just from the standpoint of Jim Keltner and his history there. So
Yeah.
Awesome.
I just want to point out one thing I didn't get to when we were talking about it before is on Ringo's Sound Edge bottom, it's stamped like a regular 602 with the red ink instead of the black wavy logo, which I had been told by somebody that worked for many, many years for Paiste that never happened, that, because I have an original Sound Edge ad and it just got the regular text red stamp. And he told me, no, they never put that on any of the cymbals. That was just done for the ad.
wow.
But Ringo has, and I didn't believe that. I was like, there's gotta be some early Sound Edge that just have the red ink on them. And that's the first time I've actually seen that on a Sound Edge with just the basic red ink stamp. So it was not only was it really cool to see that Ringo had a Sound Edge bottom, but he's got one that's stamped like nobody else's. So that was pretty cool too.
Probably the first model made,
Yeah, he
Yeah.
might have got
Makes sense. The biggest band in the world gets the first crack.
One of the first pairs. That's
Yeah.
It's like the early flat rides were stamped Space Sound, and you see
Sure.
every once in a blue moon you'll see one come up that has a Space Sound stamp on it instead of a flat ride. But very cool.
Good
to
point.
see that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Gary, you have your work cut out next time you talk to Ringo to find all these answers, because he's gonna remember everything like that. Well, gentlemen,
Yeah.
we're thank you. Brenda, do you want to show one more? It looks like you have a drumstick you want to.
I had one more question maybe to Dave.
Sure.
This is also a thing of mine, is really quick, is I have a whole also plethora of photos of Ringo's drumsticks. And I noticed in this movie, I think I have one. I always wondered about Arbiter drumsticks. And I've talked to the guys at Hollywood Pro Drum endlessly, and they have hilarious stories about Capella made drumsticks specifically. And I've had this for a while. When you see Paul always played like the butt ends down, and I'm just going to hop on Ring's kit. Okay. When he goes over, you can see this blue ink, and I've had these. It's backwards on here right now. But it's Arbiter
Ringo Starr, yeah.
Ringo Starr model, and it's very unique. It's basically based off of a Premier 7A, I want to say. I also have the Ludwig version where you can see. So I have a gold pair here, and
Looks like
I
a
know
Capella stick, but
I know Ringo used these on Bangladesh. You can kind of see the gold foil. There's an auction. Arbiter made drumsticks. Was that a normal thing in catalogs? Was that something? Because there's an Arbiter C model I saw Ringo using. I just always wondered if they just, because I've asked Gary through Ringo, we've worked through drumsticks, Gary, on the Jazz Festival project with Ringo and the Lotus Foundation, where I had some of these type of drumsticks made. And Ringo didn't remember ever having like custom made models for him, but he clearly did. I guess my question is, with Arbiter based drumsticks, was that a common type of thing to see Arbiter? Or
my understanding was, if memory serves, is that back then I think there were one or two companies in England making drumsticks, and they
Shaw?
would.
Was that one of them?
Shaw. I was just about to say, I know that
Right.
Shaw was one of them. I used to get my sticks from Shaw before I went to Bromark. I know there was Shaw and there was another make. I think there was only two. And I would imagine what happened is probably what you've already figured, Brendan.
Pro Orca,
that's
was that one of them?
Promoco. That
Pro Orca,
Promoco, yeah. Now I don't know whether Promoco was the company and Shaw was the other company, but what I would imagine, and again, you guys have probably already figured this out. I would imagine that Arbiter went to them and said, "We want to order X 100,000 pairs of sticks.
Mhm.
We're going to put our own. We're going to stick our own name brand on them." So I don't think they. I doubt very much if they. Back then, if they went to the bother of actually making their own drumsticks, I would imagine they went to either Promuco or Shaw. And if there's another one, I'm not sure. I tell you who probably would know this, and that's, as I mentioned earlier, my friend Bob Henrit.
Yeah.
He'd probably be able to put you straight. John, you should definitely get Bob involved in some of this.
Yes.
Like I say, he's just a couple of years older than me, and he's got a pretty good knowledge of the history of the UK drumming scene from the back end of the 50s through to the 60s, and he'd be able to answer that question for you, Brendan.
Cool, man. Well, thank you so much. I've had this on my mantle. I've had it for years, and I saw Ringo playing a blue scripted drumsticks in the new documentary, and they're heavy. It's also, so that's a whole other thing to the drum sound. Is these, you know, they're in between. It's tough if you've played like a Joe Morello drumstick from Ludwig. It's tough to explain. It has a really unique like shaft, I guess you want to call it. And the taper and the shoulder is very thick. And it makes me wonder if it helps Ringo shuffle. It's really easy to shuffle on these, more so than some heavy, weird 2B or anything. And I saw this in the new documentary. I was like, aha. And they're I don't know how to explain it. They're very dense feeling. Okay. You can play really loud on them or soft, but I was just curious on that. So
great stuff,
Gary,
guys.
do you know anything about the stick scenario, Gary?
No, I don't. No. Okay.
Dead end.
We're working on it. That's the next discussion. I've got some ammo, so
to be continued. I want to thank you all. I want to thank my esteemed guests, my dear friend Dave Mattacks, Brendan Lazar, Gary Astridge, Todd Little. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, man.
Illuminating.
We should do this all day, every day.
I know we could.
John, it's always great to be in the presence of a very important man in the music industry.
Starting part
Absolutely.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Well, you know, if Charlie said it, it's got to be true. That's all I can say.
No one's going to argue with Charlie. There you go.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
It's a really honor to have you
guys.
Thank
you, everybody.
Yeah, thank you. Guys, hang tight for 1 second. I'll end the stream and the recording, and then we'll say goodbye. So just hang on 1 second if you would.
Got it.
All right. Thank you all for watching.